So this is part A of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel, broadcasting only on the internet. And this is part A, which is being broadcast on on Monday, 15th of November 2021. We didn't broadcast anything on Saturday or Sunday. We did broadcast on the Friday, but we didn't broadcast anything on Saturday or Sunday. But we have been monitoring and diagnosing the contents of Fleet Street. The reason we didn't broadcast anything on 2 days, I think, is to do with the IT issues. But the theme, the narrative, the actual contents and the diagnosis of Fleet Street, they remain unchanged. This is today's Times newspaper, which has got on the front page, the main piece is about Liverpool, and the second piece, of course, is the astonishing promotion of Kate Middleton, as if she has physically kind of suffered any loss. This is an extraordinary lying posed by Fleet Street, or posed for the media. And the contrast with the depiction of by Fleet Street of Meghan Markle. And we shall be covering Meghan Markle, Ghislaine Maxwell, but we start with the covering of Boris Johnson. And this is on page 15 of the Times. Page 15 of the Times, which has the headline, they say that Boris Johnson's regret as sleaze hit support. I mean, you could not do it more kind of in denial. It's not sleaze hit support, it's Johnson increasingly exposed in sleaze and corruption and lying. It's not the same thing as sleaze hate support. Sleaze is not a personality. Sleaze is an act, and sleaze is a policy. And Fleet Street is absolutely colluding, complicit with the perpetuation of the myth that sleaze comes somewhere else. And in the third person, Johnson is referring to himself in the third person, is still in denial, and he is in denial congenitally, lyingly, dishonestly. It says in the caption to that picture, which is a posed picture taken by the Times with his hand nearly on his head, on the side of his head. And it says, at the fourth time of asking yesterday, that is, Johnson was in denial 3 times in a row. So when he was asked at the fourth time, he actually stole the phrase from Rishi Sunak and says that things has to be, that things could certainly have been handled better by me. By me is like somebody else 1,000 miles away, not him. Now, we have been observing, diagnosing, and investigating and checking the facts about Johnson. Now, this woman, she was on the front page of the London Observer, Guardian Observer yesterday. So she's one of his two ex-mistresses. It's mistress, not girlfriend, not a lover. Mistress, in order to put in context the fact that he was doing it while still lying to his wife, Marina Wheeler. Now, Marina Wheeler herself, he was married to somebody else when he met and started the adulterous relationship with Marina Wheeler herself. So Marina Wheeler knows more than anybody else what he is like. He was lying to Marina Wheeler about Petronella Wyatt. And he was lying, of course, to Marina Wheeler about Jennifer Arcuri. And what they're saying in that piece about Chinese surveillance, cheap loans, and a helpful career boost, and the caption to the picture of Jennifer Arcuri here says, Jennifer Arcuri's diary claims that Boris Johnson overruled his staff. Now, that is something we discussed in the Twitter post, and we shall be discussing more about that, because that is about the staff at the Greater London Assembly in the period starting, let's say, 2012 until 2016 or 17, during which time he was continuing his adulterous relationship with Jennifer Arcuri. Now, why it is important? Because Fleet Street has been peddling the lie, and as has the House of Commons and the so-called Parliament, that personal sexual relationship between consenting people, whether they are members of Parliament or ministers or whatever, are not illegal or are not kind of to be treated as illegal or unlawful. That's not true. Because if Johnson was having a relationship, serial adulterous relationship, by lying to Marina Wheeler, to whom he was married and with whom he had children, then it is a crime, because he was lying. Lying is not a kind of victimless crime or lawful act. Lying is always illegal and unlawful and criminal, and it's an offense. So when Johnson's obviously, even at this date, the 15th of November 2021, Johnson's adulterous, lying, and crimes kind of remain incomplete. The list of the adulterous relationships, the list remains incomplete even at this time and even at this date, when the time is, of course, 1738 GMT, which coincidentally is the same time as the British Standard Time, 5:38 hours in the evening of Monday, the 15th of November 2021. And what is happening with this caption in the Times to the picture of Jennifer R. Curry saying that Boris Johnson overruled his staff. This is not a crime on one level only. This is a crime on several levels. And as we said, this program, the Khoodeelaar television channel, carrying out the world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street. Anyone watching this should note that we don't have any followers and we don't have friends. There are a few friends who are listed on one of our kind of accounts, but that was before we began the policy of not asking for friends or allowing friends or accepting friends' requests. That is in direct opposition to the assumption by the liars of Facebook. We don't need any friends. What we post online, either on Twitter or on Facebook or on YouTube, any platform, we do that by asserting our copyrights or authoring rights, which belong with me. But also the contents are covered by all kinds of international authoring rights. And the publishers include of course, the campaign, Khoodeelaar campaign, Khoodeelaar television channel, but we have dozens of other associated programs and platforms that are involved in the production and the circulation and the publication of the contents. And our contents are made available absolutely free of charge, solely for the purpose of ethical use, moral use, and lawful use and campaigning use for only furthering the cause of justice, and totally not for any personal profit or gain whatsoever. Now, everything we say on this program, including, of course, the diagnosis, the world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street, is created by us. Anything we use as evidence, as illustration, like this one from the Times, is of course acknowledged. And apart from that, the contents we refer to are done as evidence, as reference. What we say is our own. And those items that we refer to and we mention are only in support, contextual support of the narrative, which is that Boris Johnson is a liar, Keir Starmer is a liar, and every single MP that we have had any direct evidence on or of or contacts with or knowledge about is a liar. So this is not a weak kind of connection. The fact that they're all liars significantly explains the fact that they don't hold any demands for truthfulness against Johnson or any other liars in post as minister or secretary of state or whatever. The most notorious liar to emerge through the Fleet Street coverage and cover-ups so far in the last, let's say, month is, of course, in the last months, not calendar months, but actual chronological day when the lying began, when the congenital liar Johnson began lying. That picture doesn't show him lying. He's not posing as brazen, but the photography and the publishing and the editing of that picture have been done by those who want him to stay. For example, the admission in the last, let's say, 48 hours, reportedly by Johnson's sister, Rachel Johnson, that Dirty Digger Murdoch, who owns the Times newspaper, and Dirty Digger Murdoch is a supporter of Donald Trump and a supporter of Steve Bannon, a supporter of the racists, anti-Muslims, active in the UK, active in the USA, active in Western Europe, and even in Putin's Russia. These people are kind of disagreeing on various minor issues among themselves from time to time. But on one issue, they are absolutely solidly united: the racism, the imperialism, the criminal defiance of the international treaties about the rights of the people fleeing violence and hunger and starvation and massacre and genocide and persecution from their various originating countries. And in the context of the last 30 years, or let's say last 40 years, during which time the BBC and the other propaganda platforms have been deployed to massively incite hatred against Muslims. So the anti-Muslim elements and factors that we refer to is nothing, full stop, nothing to do with our coming online and coming on this broadcast from a unexplained, undescribed kind of organization or movement. It is objectively the case that anti-Muslim hatred is part of the war, tools of war, propaganda against Muslims currently ongoing at the behest of the military-industrial complex that is mainly based in the USA but is actually operated by the inclusion of the role and the powers and the resources of the UK and other Western European countries. And military-industrial complex, as can be found in the, if you look up, military-industrial complex is about keeping the environment, the world relationships at unstable kind of level, so that conflagration, military warfare can begin at any time, which is what can be found in the coverage, the contents of the Daily Mail, for example, of London, that has been publishing lies about Russia's Putin forcing Third World War, and they're attributing the American president, current president, Joe Biden, attributing to Biden that particular assertion. They say Third World War as if it's a kid's game. They say about nuclear warfare as if it's a joke, as if it's a banter. Remember banter? Yorkshire County Cricket Club said that being racist was banter. Using racist words and phrases, as in that context, was used against the Pakistani origin Yorkshire County cricketer Azim Rafiq, that it was banter. But it was not a banter. Racist incitement, racist hatred, racist misinformation, and in this case it was anti-Pakistan, that is anti-a Muslim country, anti-a Muslim country. Pakistan is a Muslim country. Pakistan is an identifiable Muslim country. So that they don't use racist incitement as a joke. They mean to incite hatred. They mean to incite misinformation. They mean to incite denial of equal rights to the person they're attacking by calling them a Paki. And here, the Daily Mail today is putting the face of Kate Middleton. I mean, that face is being paraded as if she is the moral personification of morality and responsibility and so on. The over promotion of Kate Middleton is incredible. And there is a piece here about Robert Maxwell's daughter, Ghislaine Maxwell, reported as having been a pimp for Epstein and other abusers of girls. And there are quite a few pieces there that and here's the piece that they're celebrating the singer Adele's interview with Oprah Winfrey, in contrast to the condemnation that the Daily Mail published for days, weeks, for the interview that Oprah Winfrey conducted with Meghan Markle. And there is a picture of a woman with blonde colored hair, whether it's a genuine blonde color or not. And it looks like a woman of Western kind of origin. Whether she's biologically Western or connected with the Middle East is not obvious, but what is obvious is she looks like a white woman. And this is based on a piece called Tarina, Return from ISIS, and it's on the ITB Hub. And there is a piece starting on page 30 of today's Daily Mail. It says it's the day 2, second day of the series, headed Delivered into Hell by Nick Wallis. It's about the sub postmaster's torment. And it says, tomorrow there will be a growing campaign lays bare the truth about how the sub postmasters were exposed into hell by a series of failures by the government, including severely flawed and lethally defective technology, information technology. Now on page 2 of the mail today, it says, we must be ready for war with Russia, says Forces Chief. Now let's see this is what I said before I picked up the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail is hastily referring to war with Russia. And it says, we must be ready for war with Russia, says Forces Chief. Britain must be ready for war with Russia, the head of the armed forces warned yesterday, that is Sunday, he said. With UK troops sent to Poland last week, General Sir Nick Carter said he feared the situation on the Belarus border, where thousands of migrants are trying to cross into Europe, could escalate into something really serious. Now, anyone watching this for the first time may need to know that I, Muhammad Haque, said on Channel 4 television in January 1992 that if the Western countries that are or were already inciting disquiet against the migrants or refugees, immigrants, whatever, if they didn't deal with the causes, the main causes in the countries of origin of most of the people now described as migrants, I said that 29 years ago, January 1992, on Channel 4 News. Well, Channel 4 News, that is the slot from 7 to 8 p.m. local time. And there is a slot, literally SLOT, that I wrote and presented, only a few minutes. And my theme was that the African and Asian, mainly African and Asian migrants in today's language, who were desperately looking or would be desperately looking to find refuges and places in the UK, in Western Europe, and in the USA as well in the context, could be helped in their own countries by the West if the country's political, economic, and social situation were acceptable enough, bearable enough for most of the people that otherwise would be seeking to leave their countries and heading for the West, meaning Europe, Western European countries mainly, Canada, USA. Then that negligence and that failure could create a nightmare situation where the scale of hatred and disquiet and uncertainty and fear around the migrants would become beyond description. That is what I said 29 years ago. And over the last 29 years, I have done many publications, done many statements, many analyses, and I have updated on what I said was the situation in 1992. Now, I am not a minister, I'm not a member of parliament, and I'm not running any business, big business or small business, for profit. What I'm doing is the moral, ethical, and humanitarian work every day. So for 29 years, I've been doing this since that particular broadcast. And every single day of the 29 years, I've been doing other things as well. I'm having to do other things. I've been having to deal with all kinds of criminality and attacks and violations. But this one is a theme that is one of the permanent themes. And everything I said in that broadcast carried on the slot at the end of the particular broadcast of the Channel 4 News in January 1992. Every single thing I said there, in a substantial thing I have said there, or I did say there, has been vindicated, or I have been vindicated on. Of course, in the 29 years, there have been many other things, including the coming into power of the criminal Tony Blair and the criminal George W. Bush, and so on, and other criminals with kind of shorter and shallower magnitude, if you like. But what they have in common is that they have been neglecting. Those criminals have been neglecting the real issues. The real issues are not those between France and England, as the liar Boris Johnson and the liar Priti Patel and the lying Fleet Street keep referring to. The real issue is one factor. What is it? What is it that it is driving these people from African countries, Indian subcontinent, say India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Iran, various other Arab-speaking countries? What is it that they're trying to escape? Why are they escaping? Common sense question, and the common sense answer is that there is either lack of human rights, lack of economic rights and facilities, or there is lack of basic kind of amenities and basic services that are necessary for the maintenance of sustained life. So they're trying to stay alive with the means that are needed, and they can't find those means in the countries of their origin. So they are assuming that they find those means in the countries to which they are fleeing. Of course, the reality of the facilities, the reality of the rights, and the reality of the welcome, tolerance, is very different from what they have been told would be the case. All of this requires, to deal with all of those, requires not just the equivalent of a government department, but the equivalent of several government departments. In fact, what that requires is the transformation of all these local central government departments, regional agencies, UK-wide agencies, and each of these existing UK local borough council transformation into agencies, councils, organizations that will deliver the needs of the people, both migrants and the settled people before the migrants arrive. Needs of the society are not. Needs of the society are not being featured in any way like this by the Daily Mail. So you extrapolate that absence and apply that absence into the role of the UK government fronted by Boris Johnson as the government that actually presided over the COP26 that ended yesterday. It was extended by 1 day, so let's say that it was ended. And here is remember, this is world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street. And Fleet Street is, of course, the Daily Mail plus. And by diagnosis, it means that the Fleet Street is in a state of sickness. Fleet Street is in a state of sickness and it's ill. And I'm looking at the illness, sick Fleet Street. It's immoral and it's criminal. And here on pages 10 and 11, the Daily Mail lies. It says, Boris, I'd give COP 6 out of 10. Now that's a completely offensive focus on Johnson. Johnson is a criminal. He's a violator of the environment. He is not a source of judgment about this particular shebang that he contributed to as it failed. And then the Daily Mail is, again, in the second one, is commentary by this liar, David Rose. David Rose is letting off Johnson, and his heading is Useful Idiots Who Let China Off the Hook. Now, China is not the only one that has been let off the hook. It's India which has been let off the hook, and India has been described by Alok Sharma, the minister who formerly kind of chaired the thing, as having done the worst in terms of the agreement. So, you see, the Daily Mail is lying. Every single item, every single heading, and every single kind of bias. It is biased against China as part of the policy. And it's letting off the regime of Narendra Modi in India because of policy, despite the fact that Modi has contributed more damage than even China. So, what is this David Rose thing is saying in the last paragraph? So this piece by David Rose is a pack of lies, because it doesn't. Remember what I said about the broadcast I did in January 1992 on Channel 4 News slot. There have been billions of words and billions of pages equivalent written and published and promoted since my broadcast 29 years ago. And there is nothing. There is nothing in the billions of words. I am, of course, not giving the full literal billions of words product result here. I'm giving the actual summary of the investigation that I have been maintaining for 29 years since that particular broadcast. In the context of that broadcast, there has been nothing either about the various international laws, various international legal agreements about migrants, about the refugees, including the 1951 Refugee Convention, which the UK has ratified. So there is nothing. There has been nothing in the UK Fleet Street papers or outlets or the BBC or in Sky, ITV or whatever in the UK, the mainstream media, or in the news agencies. The UK doesn't have a news agency to compete with AFP or the American Associated Press. But the UK has the BBC. That network is quite extensive, physically extensive. But regardless of what mode the media platforms operate, in the 29 years they have not been covering. Whether or not they acknowledge my contribution, my original contribution and assertion and analysis as I broadcast, as I wrote in 1992. It doesn't matter whether they name me as the source of the particular analysis on the program. The fact remains that they have not. They have not published anything. They have not published anything that remotely resembles the urgency. The urgency and the central focus on the actual role of the UK governments, successive UK governments, or the roles of the counterparts in across the West. So if you look at the hundreds of millions of words that are available on the BBC's archives in the last 29 years, you cannot find anything even containing 100 words that actually acknowledges what I said in 1992. So 29 years, every year it's several billion pounds. The BBC collects several billion pounds every year from license fee payers like myself, and it hasn't used even £1 billion to protect society, any society in any part of the continents in Africa and Asia, from the ravages and the destruction and the lack of hope. If it had actually invested appropriate resources and empowered educators, social activists, real social activists and democratic activists and campaigners in the last 29 years, migration to the West would become unmentionably small, if any. That is possible. So why are these countries not the Western countries? Why are they ignoring? Why are they ignoring something that could be brought into control with the quality of humanity and quality of societies in African countries, Asian countries, would have been phenomenally improved to a point where most people would be able to live their lives in their own countries, or at worst in their own regions in neighboring countries. So it's not billions, it's actually trillions worth of damage that has been being done by the governments and the agencies and the media across the West, who have been neglecting what would otherwise be very simple solution: ending hunger and poverty and human rights violations. So the question is, the evidence is there that they haven't been doing the things that I said they should be doing, and I said would solve the problem. So the question is, why have they not been doing it? And the answer must be found in the possibilities that they need the crisis to remain. They need the African countries to remain unlivable in for the migrants. The Asian countries need, according to the Western countries, need the Asian countries to have unstable societies, unstable governments, instabilities, and lack of human rights and all the rest of it, so that those bad things compel the people who become known as migrants, asylum seekers, to go looking for refuges. So these are the countries, these are the Western countries, and the other side of the equation is the people who are seeking to reach the Western countries. Is there anything in the middle? Of course there is. Quite apart from the media, it's the United Nations. And if anyone can remember the United Nations, which has got the name as the organizers of the COP26 in Glasgow that ended yesterday. If anyone can remember the United Nations in the last 30 years, let's say, doing anything to prevent the exodus of people from their countries in Africa and Asia, and the determination, desperation to reach refugees in the Western countries like the UK, like Canada, like the USA, and the Western countries, other countries, France, Germany, so on. If anyone can remember that. The only person involved in the government in any Western countries in the last 29 years has, of course, been Angela Merkel. Now, Angela Merkel came to power a decade plus after my broadcast on Channel 4 News slot in January 1992. What Angela Merkel did, especially affecting numerically the most migrants coming from Turkey, into Germany. What Angela Merkel did echoed what I was saying should be done. It didn't do completely or mostly what I said should be done or need to be done or needed to be done. But Angela Merkel was the only one who began to do something that conformed to the guidance, to the guidelines, to the analysis, to the solution that I outlined, emphasized in my broadcast in January 1992 on Channel 4 News slot. Let's see when Angela Merkel came to power. So Angela Merkel came to power this month, 22nd of November 2005. So that was 13 years after I had made the broadcast. "13 years after I broadcast on Channel 4 News slot, Angela Merkel did the kind of policy. She actually implemented the policy and she became known for that policy. And I think I have said it before. So she is about to end her political career by leaving in the very near future. And she became known for her, compared to the German post-1945 Germany's kind of record. She allowed millions of Turkish kind of migrants or immigrants to become settled legally. And that created an unprecedented political shock, not just in Germany, but right across the Western European countries. Because what it did was to signify the possibility in all the other neighboring countries, if led by somebody of Angela Merkel's outlook, allowing. Remember the clarification I made about the use of the anti-Muslim kind of factor. This is the role of the Muslims compared to no other religious groups like coming from Africa or Asia. Apart from the Christian kind of denominations, no non-Christian, let's say, no non-Christian religious group has been treated with such pivotal kind of political significance as the collective Muslim group. So this is to explain that when I say Muslim, I don't mean in a kind of religious sense. I use the term Muslim and anti-Muslim in the context of identity, and the identity in the context of Europe is about the crusade, because the mainly Christian dominated Western kind of states or regimes or quote leaders, they have never been so uncomfortable by the existence of any other religion, Buddhist, Hinduism, and other religions, as they have been with Islam. And that is theological. The theological reasoning and connections and comparisons among Muslims, Christians, and Jews is very close. So close that it is worrying for the Christians and the other non-Muslim kind of faiths. And these three religions, Judaism and Christianity and Islam, are like chronologically related to one another. So that is to do with the crusade, or the crusade is to do with that relationship. And although the emergence of the so-called socialists like Charlie Marx or Lenin, or in China, Lenin's followers, Mao Zedong, or the communist parties, the antagonism towards Muslims or people from Muslim backgrounds, not theological, but in terms of demography, make a distinction there. That has been a big spar, that has been a big driver of antagonism to so many people who are of Muslim background in that sense. So when Angela Merkel in Germany moved to legalize so many millions of illegal Turkish Muslims, the shockwave was absolutely tremendous in Germany and in Germany's neighboring countries. And that shockwave has not abated. Angela Merkel has never been forgiven by the Crusaders and the other anti-Muslim kind of racists and criminals and inciters and haters. And everything else she has done, Angela Merkel has done as a stateswoman, has been, if you like, colored by what they think wrongly, falsely, factually, untruthfully, her kind of weakness or weak response to the, quote, Muslim Turks. But in the rounds, in the actual kind of analysis of Angela Merkel's 16 years or so reign as the leader of Germany, is that because she took that decision to legalize so many millions of illegal Muslims from Turkey, she fixed her imprint, if you like. She created her legacy, in my view, as a stateswoman whose legacy will far outlast today's Germany, whatever happens to today's Germany, today's Europe. And she will live in terms of the policy as a stateswoman of such monumental humanitarian courage that the world needs but has hardly had the like of for hundreds of years. Remember, I'm saying hundreds of years because even despite the fact that there was a revolution in France didn't do anything remotely like what Angela Merkel has done in Germany in the last 30 years. Well, in the last 20 years, 25 years, whatever. But in the last 30 years, meaning the 30 years, the 3 decades since my broadcast, I didn't anticipate Angela Merkel as such, but I encouraged Angela Merkel, if you like. 13 years before she appeared on the scene, I encouraged her to do the very thing that she did. But I, of course, outlined something much more than what she has done so far. But that was the right way, the correct way. The way to solve the nightmare crisis around migrants. We shall come to discussing more of that later. Let's go back to the Daily Mail and what we shall be talking about. Daily Mail page 23. Because there is a 2-page spread in the Daily Mail today about Jennifer Arcuri. Remember, we're talking about the congenital liar, the dishonest Boris Johnson. Now here is a 2-page spread on pages 14 and 15 of the Daily Mail today, Monday, the 15th of November, 2021. And what the Daily Mail is saying, they are treating it as the first time that Johnson has admitted something that he shouldn't have denied or refused to admit so long. So what they're saying is that at last, Johnson says, I bungled it. But it's not about Jennifer Arcuri. This is the Daily Mail saying that the Daily Mail man puts Johnson on the spot in sleaze debacle. And it's written by political editor Jason Groves. Boris Johnson admitted last night he had bungled the handling of this sleaze scandal. After days of denial, the Prime Minister acknowledged it had been a mistake to try to tear up Parliament's anti-sleaze rules to help former Minister Owen Paterson escape a ban for lobbying. At a press conference at Number 10 last night, Johnson initially ducked questions about his responsibility for sparking a crisis that has been Labour surge, or that has seen Labour surge into a lead in the polls. But asked by the Mail about a poll at the weekend showing two-thirds of voters want him to apologize, Johnson said, "Of course, I think things could have certainly been handled better. But let me put it that way. By me, it came as senior Tories faced further allegations of wrongdoing. Labour last night called for a sleaze probe into claims that Jacob Rees-Mogg failed to declare £6 million in loans from a farm he owns. And Grant Shapps was fighting off claims that he diverted public money to lobby against the construction of new homes on airfields he has used as a private pilot." Now, this is not the Daily Mail telling the truth, although it says that he bungled it, because the Daily Mail is still shielding Johnson. Daily Mail is still kind of protecting Johnson's image and Johnson, despite the fact that it is Johnson who has been the main liar. Johnson who has been the main denier of the truth. Johnson who has been the main wrongdoer, the lawbreaker. Johnson is the one who has been literally showing two fingers to all rules, all morality, all responsibility, all requirements of ethics, transparency, and compliance with constitutionality and the due process and the rule of law. There is the image of BabyAngelGeronimo. That's BabyAngelGeronimo. And BabyAngelGeronimo is the most consistent, coherent, most innocent, and the purest witness over the last, let's say, 5 years. Because BabyAngelGeronimo has been targeted by the liars, the depraved liars at the DEFRA, the department, the environment department, so-called, that has been supposedly concerned in existence to safeguard the welfare and well-being of animals, like the BabyAngelGeronimo. Instead, BabyAngelGeronimo has been targeted for vilification, for lying, conspired kind of theories that BabyAngelGeronimo, who is in the best health, that they have been saying that BabyAngelGeronimo has been not in the best health, that he has been carrying disease, which he hasn't. And when Johnson has been approached, since he became Prime Minister, and the DEFRA department is one of the departments that he fronts, when Johnson has been approached to stop the lies against BabyAngelGeronimo, the liar Johnson refused. And they're talking about Jennifer Arcuri as his ex. In the English language, the meaning of the word X is a legitimate meaning, a legitimate relationship that exists between two people who are not cheating on anybody else, who are not married to anybody else, who are not lying to any other partner. That is when X. When this event contains the reference to X, this is a lie. And the Daily Mail's editors, writers, reporters, sub-editors, everyone knows that Jennifer Arcuri is not his ex. Jennifer Arcuri was at that time, as I said earlier in this broadcast, 2012 onwards, let's say 4 to 5 years, Jennifer Arcuri was his adulterous mistress. Why is it important? Why am I insisting on the phrase adulterous mistress? Because that is exactly what she was. She was having Jennifer Arcuri was having adulterous sexual relationship with Johnson while Johnson was married to Marina Wheeler. And Johnson didn't tell Marina Wheeler that he was having adulterous sexual relationship with Jennifer Arcuri. So she is not his ex. Jennifer Arcuri will forever remain one of Boris Johnson's adulterous mistresses to influence whom, to get whom into bed. Johnson committed other crimes. Johnson lied to the full-time employees of the Greater London Assembly, whose particular members warned Johnson against his dealings with Jennifer Arcuri. Now that is something that the Greater London Assembly has actually known. Greater London Assembly has known since 2012 that Boris Johnson was breaking the rules, violating the law, committing crimes, and was lying, and was abusing his post. Johnson was abusing the post he was occupying at the time. Johnson was abusing the post of, within quotes, elected mayor at the expense of London. And all of those things were known to the staff at the Greater London Assembly and some members, but not to the ordinary electors of London, including myself, let's say. But putting together all the other evidence of other activities that Johnson was perpetrating at the time, I always asserted in print, and I published detailed analysis about Johnson and called him a liar at the time in 2012. And I published about a dozen or 20 separate items on the Evening Standard website. Now the Standard website, criminals have deleted or removed or hidden or archived away or stored away my comments. Not just my comments, but the comments that were published by other people who contributed at the time. But the fact is that I published detailed diagnostic, evidential, factual analysis about Johnson being a liar at the time that he was being a liar, Johnson being a crook at the time that he was being a crook in the context of his post at the Greater London Assembly as the incumbent in the post of the corrupt post of the elected London mayor. But apart from me, there was hardly anyone else that was coming online or coming to post things about Johnson. So remember what I'm saying. It's not just a broadcast part of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel. This is world exclusive report. And Jennifer Arcuri may think that she is disclosing something new. I didn't know about her existence. I most certainly didn't know about her name or her relationship with Johnson. But I didn't have to do that. All I had to say was that at the time that he was having a adulterous relationship with Jennifer Arcuri, I was saying that Johnson was committing multiple crimes on multiple fronts, and that covered it. So I am vindicated again about Boris Johnson. No Fleet Street newspapers, no Fleet Street editor, no BBC News editor or Sky News editor, commentator, nobody has said things that I have said on the evidence. Evidence being that Johnson had been a liar from the beginning of his career. And it's on the record. I mean, everything that is on the record is I mean, what is on the record about Johnson being a liar is enough, let's say. Here are the items, some telling items that refer to Johnson as a liar. Now, this is the search term that I have used. Johnson's career as a liar. So this is the first page. There are, of course, without any restrictions. So there may be other Johnsons. And here is the result, the first results. So there are 139,000 results. Johnson's career. Let's say Johnson's career as a liar. And the one dated the November, that's two years ago in November, it says, ridicule and disbelief as Boris Johnson insists he is never so this is the heading. Ridicule and disbelief as Boris Johnson insists he's never told a single lie in his whole political career. That's the piece that is on the Independent. And it's published Friday, the 29th of November, 2019 at 10:13. And immediately after that, underneath that headline, it says he was sacked twice for lying. So when he says he has never lied, he is literally lying, says Joe Swinson. Now, Joe Swinson at the time in 2019 was, of course, in the Lib Dems. And this piece is by political correspondent of The Independent, Ashley Coburn. Boris Johnson has prompted widespread ridicule after claiming he has never told a lie during his political career in a televised interview. Now, this is Boris Johnson. For those who speak Siloti, Boris Johnsone যখন হইল যে তার লাইফে তার পলিটিক্যাল লাইফও হে মিশা মাতিছে না, এটা লইয়া মানুষে আসতে আসতে শেষ. That happened in November 2019, 2 বছর আগে, November 2019. Apparently on ITV, appearing on ITV, Johnson was asked whether he could look the presenter in the eye and say he had never lied in his career, spanning back to 2001 when he was first elected as an MP. Now that's a piece in 2019, but that's not the only piece, because Johnson let's look at these items. So Boris Johnson is a shameless, pathological liar. That is 12 days after that, or 13 days after that item. This one is the piece in the Mirror Online. Boris Johnson it says Boris Johnson is a shameless and pathological liar. Now that is a piece by Peter Owen on the 11th of December 2019. So he's saying Boris Johnson is a shameless and pathological liar. He lies about anything. He lies about his private life. He lies to his friends. He lies to his colleagues. And he has been accused of misleading the Queen. We have made this point always based on the facts. This is a man who is so untrustworthy, you would never tolerate him as a work colleague. You would never hire him as an employee, and you would refuse to work with him as your boss. If he makes a promise, he will break it. He can be guaranteed to let you down. We are talking about the Prime Minister of Britain, for example. Today, we go to the polls to decide whether we want him to run this country for the next 5 years. Well, that is the dodgy area, because, and I shall just briefly refer to that as being caused by the fact that the majority of the Little Englanders who back Boris Johnson are dummies. Misled people, hoodwinked people, brainwashed people, zombified people, ignorant people, ill-read people, stupid people. Those are the people who vote for a moron, habitual, congenital liar of Boris Johnson's ilk. It will be a disaster if we put this proven and habitual liar back into Downing Street. That is what has happened. It has been a disaster. Take the NHS and so on. Remember that Johnson has repeatedly lied to us about the NHS throughout his campaign. For instance, he promises to build 40 new hospitals, Yet, as numerous fact checkers have pointed out, the truth is that he hasn't earmarked money to build a single new hospital, let alone 40. He is upgrading 6, not building 40. He also claims to be spending £34 billion of the NHS, which he says is a record sum. The truth is that in real terms, he's spending 20.5 billion, which is less than under level, not a record at all. When he went to Whipps Cross Hospital in East London, he lied to a distressed father when he said there was no press present. And he has lied again and again about Brexit, insisting there will be no checks on goods entering Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK. He can't tell the difference between truth and falsehood. His claim that he will get Brexit done is the biggest lie of all. If we leave the EU on January 31st, we will be condemned to years of acrimonious negotiations, which are still continuing. He says that the transitional period must end by 2020, come what may. That is probably impossible. I have voted Tory all my life, that is Peter Auburn, but I have become so repelled by Johnson's endless lying that I will be voting for Jeremy Corbyn when I entered the polling booth this morning. Johnson has, of course, lied again and again about Jeremy Corbyn. He says that he wants to scrap MI6, completely untrue. He says that Corbyn wants to get rid of the armed forces, another lie. Johnson says that Corbyn will drive corporation tax to the highest in Europe, another lie. Johnson says that Corbyn wants to abolish home ownership, total, absolute nonsense. Boris Johnson said that Corbyn sided with Vladimir Putin over the Salisbury poisoning, utter rubbish. These are all deliberate lies. Why does Johnson tell them? Because he knows that the voters would turn their backs on him if he told them the truth. So he has told one lie after another. And this lying policy is deliberate. Over the past week, the Tories have flooded social media with falsehoods. I warned voters, that is Peter Auburn, a lifelong conservative voter until now, that is until 11th of December 2019. If the conservatives tell you anything, don't believe them. They are lying, and they are lying for a purpose. They want to fool you into voting Tory. This is a betrayal for British democracy. It will be a dark day indeed if Johnson is returned to Prime Minister. Don't fall for his lies. You will bitterly regret it if you do. Now, there is a list then of Boris Johnson's 40 lies. 40 lies of Boris Johnson. 40 lies of Boris Johnson contain every lie that he has been listed as having perpetrated constitutes criminality, prosecutable criminality. So why has this liar not been prosecuted for any of the lies? This is a very serious issue and a very serious question. So this one, let's go back to this Jennifer Arcuri piece in the Daily Mail. That is the Jennifer Arcuri piece that contains some of the 40 lies. So let's read this heading on this piece on page 14 of the Daily Mail today, Monday, the 15th of November 2021. How Boris Johnson would X with vow to boost career. Now, this is the Daily Mail, which would not say this, which would not write that heading if somebody like Jeremy Corbyn or a Muslim had done anything remotely as brazenly criminal as that. So let's read this one. The private diary of Boris Johnson's former lover. She is not his former lover. She is his adulterous mistress. Jennifer Arcuri reveals he sought to promote her business interests. Now that is bribery and that is corruption and that is open theft of public money and public resource by Boris Johnson. So he's a thief. And Johnson as a thief should have been prosecuted long time ago for the theft or the theft. So the fresh sleaze allegations are made by the American businesswoman while detailing how Johnson tried to win her affections. Johnson tried to have sex with her when he was mayor of London. In one diary entry, Miss Arcuri claims Johnson told her, "How can I be the thrust, the throttle, your mere footsteps as you make your career? Tell me, how can I help you?" That was criminal. That was criminal because at the time, although they are not mentioned ever, most certainly not mentioned by the Daily Mail or the scum that continue to shield and shore up Johnson, there are always in post several people to make sure that the decisions by the mayor are made by following a number of steps, procedural steps that mean that they are being done properly, lawfully, legally, ethically, morally, and without sleaze. That is the fact. So when he said that, "Tell me, how can I help you?" he was completely overlooking the responsibility that he owed to follow those steps, those procedures, those legal routes. And the Daily Mail said the excerpts, that is, parts of the Jennifer Arcuri diary, suggest he may have broken the rules governing ethical conduct in public office and could raise the possibility of a criminal investigation. Now, look at how the Daily Mail is going around the kind of skirting around the issue, not saying that Boris Johnson was out and out committing crimes and criminality and should have been prosecuted long time ago and should never have been allowed to stand as an MP, let alone to be the leader of the Conservative Party or the incumbent in the post of Prime Minister in the name of Britain. He would not be there. And the Daily Mail knew that, or ought to have known that at the time of the election, at the time of the elections, each election. And the Daily Mail colluded with him, was complicit with him. And the Daily Mail lied as well. So the Daily Mail itself should be prosecuted. So let's read more. Last week, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, said MPs who break conduct rules should be punished. He did not mention Jennifer Arcuri in his declaration of interest when he was mayor. And when news of their relationship broke in 2019, he said there was no reason for a declaration. A government spokesman said, as mayor, Boris Johnson followed all the legal requirements in the Greater London Assembly's Code of Conduct at the time. That's not true. Another diary entry from 2012 states that Mr. Johnson, 57, told Miss Arcuri, who was then 27, I can barely control myself whenever I see you. You make me too excited. Baby, I couldn't wait. Other excerpts published in the Observer alleged he bragged about ignoring advice from officials about keeping a distance from the Har IT company. Inotech. Members of the Greater London Assembly, the Greater London Authorities Oversight Committee, which is investigating allegations of conflict of interest during Johnson's time as mayor, said the revelations were significant. Now, that is, the members of the Greater London Assemblies, what is it called? Oversight Committee. This is the watered down understatement by the relevant members of the Oversight Committee, who themselves should be prosecuted as criminally negligent of their duties to safeguard public office and safeguard the public. Office was done properly, while Johnson was damaging, looting, robbing, and abusing and assaulting it. Now, his current wife, who is the kind of person he married because he didn't want to be living with a mistress while he in incumbent as prime minister. But Kerry Johnson said more than the charity that employs Kerry Simmons, paid more than £150,000 to its chairman's wife for interior design services last year. The figure paid by the Aspinall Foundation equates to 10% of all the donations received from public and corporate donors in 2020. The organization and its sister charity, the Howlett's Wild Animal Trust, are already being investigated by the Charity Commission over their spending and financial management. The Daily Mail revealed in April 2021 that watchdogs had launched a probe into the payments made to Chairman Damian Aspinall and other family members. This included concerns that £12,500 had been handed to his wife Victoria for interior design services in 2019. But updated accounts filed last month revealed that Mrs. Aspinall's fees had gone up 12-fold in 2020 to £150,158. The foundation insisted her fees had been subject to rigorous benchmarks to ensure it received value for money. What absolute criminal, abusive language. The Aspinall Foundation is riddled with murderous incidents. Many of the workers were murdered by animals that were neglected themselves. And none of the murders has been actually followed by any of the Aspinalls being prosecuted, held to account. So it's literally a murderous organization that has been paying Boris Johnson's wife. Carrie Simmons. And what is happening with this history of the criminality is that it's not exceptional, that it is actually a fact. Now, let's look at the Times again and look at what they're saying about Jennifer Arcuri. Okay, so they're talking about the Chinese surveillance, cheap loans, and a helpful career boost. All of those refer to Jacob Rees-Mogg's criminality, Fiona Bruce's criminality, and the final part on the page, on the column 5th of the 5 columns, says previously unpublished diary. I'll read again. Previously unpublished diary extracts by the American businesswoman Jennifer Arcuri alleged that Boris Johnson overruled advice of staff meaning the staff in the Greater London Assembly or Greater London Authority, overruled the advice of staff to promote her business, that is Jennifer Arcuri's business. She is now publishing that. According to one entry by Jennifer Arcuri, Johnson, then London mayor, offered to be the thrust that would accelerate Arcuri's business career. The thrust could be also interpreted contextually that would accelerate Johnson's much sought entry into a sexual relationship with Arcuri herself. That is our paraphrase. The diary entries seen by the observer appear to have been written while Arcuri and Johnson were having an affair. Arcuri received £126,000 in public money when Johnson was mayor of London. He did not mention her in his declaration of interest, and after news of their alleged affair broke in 2019, he said there was no interest to declare. Now, there was the biggest interest for him at the time. He cannot contain himself, he says, according to the same diary. A government spokesman said last night, that is Sunday, the 14th of November 2021, as mayor, Boris Johnson followed all the legal requirements in the Greater London Authority's Code of Conduct at the time. That is a lie. What the Times doesn't do is ask the number 10 officials to exactly quote what those regulations were, requirements were. Because if the Times had done that, the lying number 10 would not be able to articulate that. And we shall come to the suspension of part of the corrupt criminal HS2 later or in due course. Hey, sure or white fucking shit. Now, if you look at any part of public life in Britain, let's say in the last 20 years, and here is the, I mean, if you look at the last 20 years, because those 20 years have been the center of Boris Johnson's career in public life, let's say. And if you look at every aspect of the public life that Boris Johnson has touched or been associated with, you will find that he has been contaminated, and he has been contaminating openly in public. And that Fleet Street, which is supposed to be the main platform of record of public life by anyone in public life of any significant position, you'll find the role of the Fleet Street newspapers as being completely complicit with the criminality of Boris Johnson. That is what I'm saying today, Monday, the 15th of November, 2021. And if you look at the Times, page 30 of the Times hires, Times, remember, is owned by the dirty digger Rupert Murdoch. So the dirty digger Rupert Murdoch employs the only black-skinned columnist who is the mental slave Trevor Terrible P-Lips. The mental slave Trevor Terrible P-Lips is in wanton, brazen denial of what I'm saying, what the facts are saying. What even one person, which is Boris Johnson, and his corrupt, lying career is saying. This mental slave, Trevor Terrible P-Lips, is saying, people worldwide see our democracy, means the UK democracy, as a light in a darkened sky. How is that statement even worth repeating? Everyone who has got any sense, not the full sense, but who has got any sense whatsoever about morality and about ethics and about right and wrong, about the duties and about the evil of racism and the need to racism, about the violations of human rights directly perpetrated by the perpetrators across the worldwide countries that have been adversely affected and have been kind of receiving the advice and expertise in cruelty and criminality by the British experts and British state, knows that Johnson is not an exception, that the whole British state has been corrupt right from the beginning. And that somebody like the mental slave Trevor Terrible Peelips can say what he's saying in the Times today is not because of the evidence of light in a darkened sky or something, but because the brainwashing done of the people right across the globe at the expense of the local talents, the local legacies, the local traditions, has been done in order to create the mythical image that the imperialists were good, empire was good, and the empire followers, the empire supporters, and the imperialist supporters, the imperialism supporters, were doing a favor to the victims of empire and imperialism. For example, when Churchill in 1943 caused the genocide of the people in Bengal region of the subcontinent, that was just 4 years before the British were unable to continue any longer. In 1947, August 1947, Churchill, as Prime Minister, that was 1943, that was the duration of the so-called war, that is, they call it World War and I call it the European War. And I call it European War for reasons that outlast all the other imperialistic description of the war, calling it World War. It wasn't World War, it was a war waged in Europe by the Europeans. The Africans didn't wage it, the Asians didn't wage it. Well, I'm meaning by Asia, the subcontinent, not Japan and China. So the war that ended in 1945 was still going on in 1943, and Churchill decided to divert millions of pounds worth of resources away from the use of the people in the subcontinent and into Europe, elsewhere, thus immediately plunging the subcontinent, and especially because of the chain and transportation, etc., the part that is mainly Bengal, part of Bengal, the Bengal province of India today, and Bangladesh, most of Bangladesh today, because Sylhet was not in Bengal, and other parts of what is Bangladesh were not part of Bengal. But essentially, the main victims of the kind of starvation of the famine that resulted from Churchill's diversion of the resources were in Bengal. So, Churchill has been described as the man who caused the genocide of millions of Bengalis. Because of that. So, Churchill is not somebody that can be excused. Liability. Because Churchill needs to be held to account for his causing the genocide of the Bengalis. Now, the contrast in the context should be made by comparing Churchill's role with the role of Adolf Hitler, which is what has been happening in the research and investigation made in India by several people, including not the only one, but including the Indian Congress Party politician Shashi Tharoor. Now, Tharoor has also appeared at the UK in the Oxford University debate, and he has expanded on this detail. And Tharoor is one of the students of Churchill's genocidist policy. So anyone who wants to look up and get the details of what Churchill did in creating the genocide in Bengal can include Shashi Tharoor as one of the sources or one of the source materials to find out about the details of what Churchill did. Let's see what is available on the okay, there is a limited kind of admission of the truth in the racist Wikipedia, because the Wikipedia is itself racist, is in denial, but this entry has got a picture from the Statesman on the 22nd of August 1943, which is a paper in Calcutta. And it says that these photographs made world headlines and spurred government action. So the country is described as British India. Location is Bengal and Orissa. And the period is 43 to 44. And total deaths estimated to be 2.1 to 3 million in Bengal alone. There's a lot of material there. And so there are various entries that are headed Churchill's policies contributed to 1943 Bengal famine. That's from The Guardian in March 2019. Churchill's policies to blame for 43 Bengal famine study, that is 1st of April 2019 in aljazeera.com. And this is the BBC item dated the 21st of July 2020. And it's written by someone called Yogita Limia, BBC News correspondent, India. And it says Churchill's legacy leaves Indians questioning his hero status. And this person who is writing this says, I learned about Winston Churchill as a child, a character in an Enid Blyton book. I was reading, kept a picture of him on the mantelpiece in her home because she had a terrific admiration for this great statesman. As I grew older and had more conversations about India's colonial past, I found most people in my country held a starkly different view of the wartime British Prime Minister. There were conflicting opinions about colonial rule too. And these are the pictures of 3 starving children who must have died. And this is a picture of the Bengali actor Soumitra Chatterjee, who says that he's still haunted by memories of the famine. And he says, everyone was looking like a skeleton with just skin over their frames. And the description is unbearable. And this is the reality. Even though the Wikipedia entry is completely incomplete, because it's not telling the truth about Churchill, not telling the truth about the empire, anything like the truth about the empire. So, against that background, if you look at the tweets claiming that Boris Johnson in number 10 Downing Street was busy writing a Churchill book or a Shakespeare book, according to Dominic Cummings. You can imagine Boris Johnson, the depth of the depraved contempt by Boris Johnson to the duty to society, to the truth. And it's simply not possible for Boris Johnson to lie and restore Winston Churchill to any position that would benefit the lying Boris Johnson career. The truth is out. So where to actually sink the criminals like the mental slave Trevor Terrible Phillips? And look at this typically racist and typically contemptuous reference to the Chinese government treatment of the Muslim Uyghurs. This editorial in the Times today, on page 33, leading articles. First one is Good Cop, which is about the climate conference that's just ended. And the second of the three editorials is China Conundrum. And it says the West must confront Beijing's behavior towards the Uyghurs and Taiwan. Now remember the thing that Boris Johnson said about the Muslim women wearing burqas, resembling bank robbers. Johnson has not been condemned for that, not nearly enough. And Johnson has not been prosecuted, which he should have been prosecuted for inciting racist hatred against the Muslim women. And Johnson also said, remember the 40 lies in the Daily Mirror on the 11th of December 2019 that Peter Oborn wrote? Those 40 lies must have included the lie or lies that Johnson perpetrated for Brexit against the Turkish people invading Britain if the British didn't vote to leave the European Union. So these are the two things. And Boris Johnson is not yet, years after he said each of the lies, dreadful lies, lethal lies, he is not apologizing for the lies he told against the Turkish people coming into Britain. And he hasn't apologized for lying, inciting the hatred against Muslim women wearing burqas resembling bank robbers. So there are three current topics that Johnson needs to be prosecuted for over his incitement to hatred against Muslims by lying against Muslims. One is the ongoing persecution of Muslim Uyghurs in China by the non-Muslim Chinese, and the fact that the Turks have not invaded. This thing requires extra explanation, because the Turks were never going to invade the UK or any part of the European Union, not in the context of the European Union. Now separate that from the arrival in Germany by the Turks that Angela Merkel took some substantial action about. So when Johnson said that the Turks would arrive and appear in Britain if the British didn't vote to leave the European Union, what did Boris Johnson actually say? Boris Johnson said that so the whole of the Fleet Street and the American, the New York anti-Muslim media lied to hide and deny the lies by Boris Johnson against the Turks. Because Johnson's lying is not included in any of the headlines. So here is a list of the samples. UK media coverage of the 2016 EU referendum campaign, and then the other one dated the 7th of June 2021. Boris Johnson knows exactly what he is doing. Let's see if this Atlantic is liar Johnson. And it says, the first, nothing can go wrong, Boris Johnson said, jumping into the driver's seat of a tram he was about to take for a test ride. Nothing can go wrong. Johnson was visiting a factory outside Birmingham, campaigning on behalf of the local mayor ahead of Super Thursday, a spate of elections across England, Scotland, and Wales in early May. These elections would give voters a chance to have their say on Johnson 2 years in office, during which quite a lot did go wrong. Johnson was, as usual, unkempt and amused, a tornado of bonhomie in a country where politicians tend to phlegmate and self-serious, if not dour and awkward. I mean, why do the Americans, this scum, write this positive rubbish? And the morons Don't get to the point. And this criminal is supposed to be talking about the liar's lies. And it's the Atlantic piece is by Tom McTague, is a lengthy promotion for the liar. That's what I mean. That despite the fact that there is undeniable, persistent evidence of Johnson lying, Johnson being dishonest, Johnson being unfit for purpose, Johnson being corrupt, Johnson being abuser of all known rules, all the media coverage ends up giving him excuses and pretexts, which is why his lies about the Turks, the lies about the Turks, which are criminal, have yet not been followed by prosecuting Johnson. So we go back to the Times and the editorial in the Times today, Monday the 15th of November 2021. It doesn't talk about the now here is a kind of reluctant admission by the Times editorial about genocide of the Uyghurs in China by Chinese. Genocide is so grave a term that it is hard to credit that it only came into use 7 decades ago. The man who invented it, Raphael Lemkin, called it a crime without a name, one he had not seen visited on the Armenians decades before his own community of European Jewry would suffer the worst genocide in human history. Mass murder may not amount to genocide if it is not intended to wipe out an entire people, nor does genocide require a single life to be taken. These peculiarities lie behind the debate underway in Britain over whether what China is doing to its Uyghur population in Xinjiang should be correctly called a genocide. The British Parliament has said that it is, but the British government holds back, refuses to call it genocide. Washington has already firmly stated that the term genocide fits what the Chinese are doing to the Uyghurs, Muslims. And yet, the world does almost nothing. Now, there is a statement that is actually factually correct. How to engage with China is perhaps the most vexatious foreign policy issue any government now faces. It is the world's second largest economy, and within decades will be the first. It is the world's most populous country, a burgeoning nuclear power, and a leader in military technology. First and foremost among those it threatens is Taiwan, a vibrant democracy and staunch ally of the US now. What is the vibrant democracy is also subject to various qualifications, which nonetheless will not recognize its sovereignty, choosing to keep peace with, with Beijing. The West's endless fudge over Taiwan is illustrative of the tightrope it walks with an ever more assertive Beijing, fearful of prodding the dragon. President Biden will today hold his first summit with Xi Jinping, albeit a virtual one, against a backdrop of spiraling tensions in the Taiwan Strait and further into the South China Sea. Mr. Xi comes to the meeting buoyed by last week's Communist Party plenary, at which he was recognized as one of modern China's three most epochal leaders. Mr. Xi sees the reunification of Taiwan with mainland China as an inevitability, one he would dearly love the credit for. Mr. Biden will warn him that the consequences of attempting that will be higher than Beijing can bear. Taiwan's freedom depends on Mr. Xi believing this to be the case. But will he, when a US government that does recognize the Uyghur persecution as genocide takes no meaningful action beyond imposing localized sanctions that do little to blunt the worldwide trade in goods made by an enslaved minority? See, they're using the genocide of the Uyghurs as a bargaining tool about America and China, not about the human rights of the Uyghur Muslims. And they don't even mention the Muslims. They talk about Uyghurs, they talk about enslaved workforce, but they don't talk about the word Muslim. Think about that. So we shall be talking more about all these issues in due course. Going back to the naming of these editions as Baby Angel Geronimo, what Baby Angel Geronimo symbolizes, what the depraved lying and lies against Baby Angel Geronimo by Boris Johnson fronted depraved DEFRA amount to and represent is an evil regime that cannot be described adequately by being called the regime that is fronted by a serial liar like Johnson, fronted by a congenital liar by Boris Johnson, like Boris Johnson, fronted by a sleaze, sunk in sleaze crook like Boris Johnson. Evil is the word. Darkness is the word. And we have said before that So this is just shifting away for the time being from the genocide of the Uyghur Muslims and the media's. The Times says, for example, refusal to refer to the Muslims by name, and onto the state of wealth and assets and property on page 25 as discussed by Rana Foroohar. Now, Rana Foroohar is talking about a McKinsey study which has found a strong inverse correlation between net worth relative to gross domestic product and 5-year rolling averages of nominal long-term interest rates. And in the third paragraph of our piece, she says, we know home prices are inflated in many places, but a new study from McKinsey Global Institute, which tallies up the balance sheets of 10 countries that represent 60% of global income, Australia, Canada, China, France, Germany, Japan, Mexico, Sweden, the United Kingdom, and the US, has some eye-popping numbers about just how much money is in real estate and why. The study, entitled The Rise and Rise of the Global Balance Sheet, looked at real issues, financial assets, and liabilities held by households, governments, banks, and non-financial corporations. It found, the McKinsey study that is, that 2/3 of net worth is stored in residential, corporate, and government real estate as well as land. So Rana Foroohar says, for all the talk of digitization, it seems that bricks and mortar are back now, are the new bricks and mortar. In her second paragraph, she says, going back, South Korea's ruling party took a beating in mayoral elections for failing to stop a 90% rise in the average price of a Seoul apartment. China's President Xi Jinping has made affordable housing a huge part of his common prosperity theme, saying that housing is for living in, not speculation. Now, this is a trendy piece by Rana Foroohar, who, despite the fact that she is talking about housing and talking about Xi Jinping's quotation, is failing to tell the truth about the majority of the crisis in housing, say in the UK, caused by local councils and by government and by the absence of the remedies against corruption in housing and corruption of the court system, about the eviction procedures that are out of control. And we shall be talking about housing and councils and government during the next part, whenever the next part is. This is just around 2.5 hours, I think. We shall find out how long this has been.